Hello peoples. I thought I'll show you in a somewhat longer form YouTube video how this little device works in Unity and VR and 3D. I posted a few little clips of it on Twitter, which got great response, 600 new followers, so thank you. Also a few remarks asking me to explain how I put it together, so I thought, let me try that again. It's been a while, but this should be somewhat doable. Let me show you how it works. This is the cassette deck. There's some bashing sounds on it. You have to bash it really hard before you really get that sound. I should take care that it doesn't fly off thanks to the wonky physics. It has rattle sounds, it has sounds under the buttons and stuff. It only works once you put everything in, so you can put a tape in, but then, well, you still need the batteries. Obviously, tape can come out. Batteries go in two ways, so you can, let me see, enter them wrongly, which I kind of like, because it makes it fiddly and a joy to actually get them in the right way. And then everything should work. Obviously this still works. Sorry, that was the wrong button. So you press record and you get a little microphone for which the use is somewhat of a mystery still, and I will keep it a mystery until I decide what to do with it exactly. And when you press play, you get a little headphones with music. I'm gonna quickly stop so that the YouTube demons won't get me. So that's it. I'll just open this one up in Cinema 4D and then Unity and try to run through all the technical details for your edification. So see you in a bit. Hello, there we are. Let me turn on the... there's no grid here because I'm not in a modeling mode. So this is the model. This is came fresh out of blocks. I rearranged it a bit just for pivots and stuff. I'll just run you through it quickly. The main thing I'm doing here usually is just adjusting the pivots to a logical point. I already knew I wanted to use the plugs for a cable, so I put the pivot where I want the cable to be attached, which is just logical. This one has one on where it should rest on the floor, which makes placing it more easier. Let's see, what do we have? Same for the headphones. So here I do it in the center of gravity and not at the cable attachment for some silly reason. Microphone, same thing. Battery, just center of gravity. This I adjusted so that the Z-axis is, which will flip in Unity, is pointing out of the lid, so that the lid and the cassette have the same axis. This is the rotation point for the lid. So I've set that already here, so I don't need extra empty game objects. Same with all the buttons. They, let me see, they all have their own, oh, excuse me, nice rotation points. And that's not much more that I did in here. Lately I have been using another trick to get the objects materialized in Unity. I used to just use the colors as they came out of blocks. So these are largely the same colors. But then I would have this battery with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different colors, which is 5 different meshes in Unity. And right now I have a little script that turns those colors into vertex colors. So I just use one material with vertex colors to so there's only one material in Unity that I need for all the objects together, and I do a quick hack in the UV channel, channel. Why not? Let me see if I can show you. So maybe it's best to use the CassetteDeck for that. So you have to imagine that this is the UV area. There's a gradient running from black here to white here in, let me think, the smoothness channel. So that's the alpha, which means that if I have an area of the CassetteDeck UV, I can decide how smooth it is by moving it up and down here. So this is very not smooth. This is 100% smooth and reflective. This is more or less nice plasticky if I leave it over here. And then I have a gradient running from here to here that defines the metallicity of the color. So these are all the pluggy bits and some extra bits inside, which I decided should be feeling a bit more like metal, so I move them over to this place. And these are just shrunken down UV islands of the object as it came in. So these bits are metallic and rather smooth. These bits are plastic and also rather smooth. There are a few bits here and there, the blackness here, that I just don't want to be reflective at all. I skipped on the rubbers I see now. Oh, you can see here that I still have the battery lid that I don't actually use in the final thing, but it's still in here. So I think that's all I wanted to show in Cinema 4D. And yeah, let me turn over to Unity now. I should tell you that I have not prepared this, so I'm just gonna try and freewheel this and see what happens. I always, when I switch between 3D programs, I have to remind myself what the key combos are. Also, sometimes, I'm sorry that this has to happen, I need to turn off Windows Ink, I think, to get my right click. Huh. This is horrible. I'm probably gonna cut this bit out, because here's my double click, here's my right click. Let's turn this one into a middle click, maybe? Yes. Okay, sorry, I had my stuff set up wrongly. Turn on lighting here just so it looks better. Well, it's not really handy, is it? Maybe like this? I don't know. I really don't know. Let me just do it like this. So, let me see. This is the big Tapedeck group. I just placed it in the swamp world here, so I had some nice environments to do my little bashing tests in and stuff. Because the fun thing of VR development and interaction development like this is that you continually have to enter VR and play with the thing you're building. So that's also, well, it's nice to have a nice room to do it in, although the frame rate may suffer a little. So these things we're going to ignore. Those were a few text bubbles that I used for one of the movies I made for Twitter. I'm gonna quickly check if my volumes are okay and stuff, and then we'll dive right back in. Seems all okay. So I think I will just run you through these in order, and we'll see what we will encounter. That means the batteries are up first. These are just the basic physical setup I usually use for basic physical objects. Let me see. Rigid body. In this case, Unity has just started up, so it needs to fill some caches or something. Something that it sometimes is a bit slow twirling open the modules here. Capsule collider. NVR interactable item. That's just the Newton VR way of telling an item that is already physical to also be pickupable and removable and movable and stuff. The only interesting things here are, other than the way the axes are pointed, is the fact that I have gave it the tag slottable. So that's for things that should fit into slots that I'm gonna show you in a while. Those are over there in the cassette deck. So that's just a way of having the script quickly check when an object enters the slot if it's something it should take a look at. And I gave it a super simple script named object slottable. And that's really just a container script for this slottable type string. I'll show you anyway. Oh, there's an awake function on there, which we don't really need. And that's just so I can describe what type of object this is, because I can't refer to objects directly. These should both go into both slots. And if there are multiple cassettes, they will be called slottable type cassette, and the slot for the cassette player will recognize that that's one that can enter there. So that's not too interesting. The cassette here, same story. Slottable. Rigid body, box collider, and are interactable. Again, the axes all point the correct way for the slot already. This one I gave just a proxy script for now. There's nothing happening in this script at all. Because I know I want to have multiple cassettes in the world, and I will denote them with different colors and maybe different labels and stuff, so you know which one is which. That's also the reason that this cassette has 3 materials. So, excuse me, the vehicle mass is my general vertex color, metallicity, ambient occlusion, smoothness shader that I throw on almost everything in the world. And then I decided to treat the plastic differently and the accent color differently. So this is just a red stripe over here. So I can at least change the color of these materials if I want to define another one. Why can't I? Oh, sorry, yeah, I haven't imported them into my, or replaced them with a Unity material. These are just the materials still as they come out of the model itself, so I can't change them because that's all embedded inside the model. That will all come later. So, next thing, well, a reflection probe just to make things look nice for the videos. This table is also just for now, so that I have something to stand against and to bash my stuff against. Not important, another battery. And here's the evolution of my tape deck solutions. So we'll just concentrate on the big one. This contains everything that makes the thing work. Let me quickly close it up. So the basics is, again, it's a physical object, it's a rigid body. I gave this one a bit more weights to balance out all the physical things that are inside, but other than that, it's just an interactable item. I built my simple shapes out of multiple box colliders on the same object, so it used to be just one big box collider, but then I wanted to be able to insert batteries into it, so I built it out of, can we see what happens if I do this? a few different loose box colliders, so I have a hole in the back, and that's the reason that there are so many boxes over here. There's a tape deck handler here with some functionality that I will come across later. And there's a impulse sounds script on it. And this is just a quick hack. I am not sure if I'm going to use it, but I'm going to show you anyway. There is a reference to impact sounds with this, which is just this audio source here with an extra script attached to play various versions of one sound. So those three bash at different pitches depending on how hard you hit it. And there is a rattle sound, which is this one, which is just one single continuous loop of bashing stuff, a continuous loop of rattling, which I shuffle through and pitch up and down when you shake it, and it's all defined by measuring. Let me just show it in script. It's not too difficult. It seems a bit long. Oh, okay. My tablet. I like to do this with my my tablets because it clicks. It makes less less noise than my mouse. My mouse is horrible for recording the things, and I often have to switch this bit here to make the tablet actually work in different programs. It's hopeless, but I never got round to fixing that. Let me see. Yes, where does the magic happen again? The only thing it does is every update it checks if it's still playing the rattle sound at a hearable volume. If it's not, if it is, it just ramps down the volume every time until obviously a new impact comes. And if it's completely at zero, it pauses the whole sound so it doesn't eat resources, and so this doesn't get run if there's nothing playing. If something is hitting it, I just measure the relative velocity here of the collision, and I use the magnitude, not the square magnitude, because I hope this doesn't happen all too often, and throw that into the function trigger bash, which plays both a rattle sound and, if you turn this one on, impacts a impact sound, and that's just the two sounds here I just explained that get turned on with various settings like volume and pitch, dependent on how hard you've hit it. And on fixed update, I check if we're sleeping. This is obviously the rigid body of the object, in which case I do nothing. If I'm handling it though, if I'm not handling it, I do nothing. If I'm handling it, I'm measuring the velocity, the acceleration, and the impulse. I'm not entirely sure if I'm doing the correct thing here, but it works with a crazy offset value. I ended up, I believe, only using the acceleration actually. Oh no, I'm using the impulse, yes. So the acceleration we all know about is the impulse is the derivative of the acceleration. So it measures how quickly the acceleration changes. And if the acceleration changes quickly, I measure that, how quickly it does with the shuffle float here, which is a value between 0 and 1, because it's an inverse lerp between two values, and run the function if there's a big impulse. And this is just some debug stuff that I could remove right now. So that's the rattling, and that just calls on the same function, but doesn't use the impact bit. Yeah, just it's been on screen long enough so you can dive into it if you're interested. Was not planning on really running deeply through all the scripts. So let me continue with the functionality of the thing. So that's the master object. But I like to build up my master object out of very tiny, not super tiny, but small interconnected objects. The only thing that really manages the cassette deck as a whole is this script here. And the only thing that does, although it looks like a lot, is subscribe here to all the various little child objects that are doing their own thing, which we will run across. And if there's ever an update in their state, like there's a battery entered or there's a cassette entered, it runs the update states, sees what all the values of all the tiny objects are now, and sets some global booleans, which are here. So it has power, gets set if there are two batteries. It has cassettes, gets set if the cassette is both in the lid and the lid is closed. And can use cassette means that the buttons should be turned on that can play and record stuff. So that's all the manager tape deck handler really does. And all the functionality is defined in the tiny objects that are attached to it. So I don't know if it's smart to do this all in order, but well, I have no plan, so this is my script. Now let me quickly do the last one here. I have a very simple script, good tip to have always in every project. This is a center of gravity script. All it does is set. Yes, did I double click this? On enable, it looks for its rigid body component in its parent. So in this case, that's the cassette deck. And it sets the center of mass of that rigid body to its own center. And that's a very nice way to balance out your object if it like tends to flip over when you do something or so. Because I believe the center of gravity, if you have let Unity calculate that automatically, it will take into account all the colliders that it finds, I believe. I'm not sure. But I found that once I added all the extra colliders, it tended to go off balance. So I added the center of gravity here and just messed around with its placement until I found this place, which seemed to work good. Set just once just means that it sets the center of gravity on run. If I turn this off, it will set it every frame. I could even animate it. Super good script to have if you're using physics. So let me follow my script now. This is the mini jack plug. Nothing interesting, just a plug, just a model mesh, and the pivots placement is like I defined it. Now there are the peripherals. You know what? I'm gonna move those to further down the line. Maybe it's smart for me to just run through in the same way as that I put it together. So that would mean, I think it would mean that I start with these buttons. Let's just start with those buttons. So, now this is an interesting problem, because these buttons are way too small for, go away, are way too small for your VR controller to hit them dependably. So I have a little thing I use elsewhere in APOTU. I can maybe just better show you and hope that the volume doesn't go haywire. Let me try. Finding my controllers. I will talk a bit more softly now. This is how I did it here, but the thing I had in APOTU before is this thing, that as soon as I grab the glasses here, the other hand gets this little, I call it the tweezer control, and that means that that's now the collider for my hand, effectively. So now I can grab tiny things on this thing, whoop, and act like that. And that works very well. But somehow it didn't work so well for this. And since this is just a project of experimentation, I decided to try something else. So I'll run you through what I built in here to make these buttons work. I really hope the volumes and the sound in that are okay. Excuse me if they aren't. I know the microphone gets a lot closer to my face when I put on my glasses, my HMD. Anyway, so two things. I didn't want the objects to be fully physical in this case, because that would just mean that you could accidentally bash them against the table and things would turn on and the eject button would go off and everything would go haywire. So I wanted to use a different system for seeing if the user is meant to press them. So I didn't also need the full Newton VR definition of if you could grab a button and such. I decided to go with a simple push button script here that just references the box collider and sees if there's a collision happening. Let me just open it up and show you what I mean. You have to ignore for now that there's a list of targets that it's checking. This is just the 2 fingers that it can check. And it's not that difficult. This is just a bit maintenance code. So if a collider enters, it checks if it is not already tracking that collider, or if, let me see, or if targets count is null, it checks for tags instead of specific colliders, which is something I don't use anymore. I just check 2 specific colliders, the left finger and the right finger. If the button is already moving, we ignore everything. If the velocity of the entering collider is the wrong way up, then I ignore it. So here I decide only to see if we have a collider entering that moves downwards, so to say, downwards in the button space. Well, in velocity space, and I think I define velocity space as, this here. So anything that moves downwards along this y-axis is treated as something that could depress the button. I have to mess with my HMD, sorry. It's making my forehead itchy. So, now we're sure something entered that should affect the button, so we animate the button to its special state. I will talk you through this later. Try to remind me, I don't know. Here are some flags that are checked. That is to say, if the button is not active, or if it's one of the toggle buttons, then it should, after a while, also play the counter animation to return to the state. So it just runs a subroutine here that waits for a bit, then waits to see if the animation is finished, then waits for a bit, and then animates back to the base state. Yes. If it's an active button, so one that should be working, It calls on its Unity events, which are defined for each button over here. So on press are the events which steer the other stuff in the cassette deck. Stop button does nothing, funnily enough. So this is just the events I define here. Record button as an event. And here is a little magic happening. If we're depressed and we're working, then we have to unpress all our siblings. So that means that if I press this one, all the other buttons will receive a state that says go back to your normal states and go be normal buttons that are upwards instead of downwards. And then a little audio, just playing a random audio sounds when the button is clicked, if it's working or not. This unpress siblings just runs through all the other push buttons and turns them off if they're not themselves, so to say. So that's how the button works. I hope that is obvious a bit. I don't know if there's... Yeah, there's some interesting stuff happening inside the buttons. This is just a sound, by the way. Yeah, let me run through that first before I run through how I did the fingers. So the eject button simply calls on the lid here, which we didn't run through, and calls the function release if it's pressed. So then the physical lid here will go into action and rotate upwards. And it will also run a function on the slot where a cassette could be. After a tenth of a second, it will send an eject command that way, so the lid gets the chance to open a bit and then eject the cassette. The stop button does completely nothing because of that magic unpress siblings button. It just takes care that all the other buttons are not pressed anymore, are not depressed anymore. Unpressed? I don't know. You'll get what I mean. I'm sure. The play button on press, it simply spawns the headphones, and it does that. It's my favorite. Well, my favorite trick. I think it's quite default, but it's simply referencing the headphones model root. So everything that the headphone has, is in this root, and just enables the game object, and then the headphones figures out what to do for himself. And if it's turned off, so in the unpressed state, it turns the headphones off. Simple as that. Well, the record button is just reverse the same, but then for the microphone objects over here. So that's how I send out commands from the buttons. Now let's get to the fingers, because that's kind of interesting what happens here. I have this script doubled over here. I'm just gonna explain one of them. So, because I have one for each hand, each finger. And I messed around with a lot of extra experiments with the tweezer control I just showed you on the glasses, making that work here. And it just wasn't reliable, because it's, I don't know. And then I came up with this bit. So this is the tweeze button group. So that's the buttons plus a rather wide area plus a small area, and it checks just to try and make it short. If a hand is entering the bigger box collider here, and then as long as the hand is inside that box collider, it will place a finger here. So this is two fingers here. A finger object, which I still need to change. And let me rephrase. As long as the hand is within this space, it will track this right finger to a position on the controller that's equivalent or more or less for where your finger could be, and I just decided that on feel alone, where it could be a good place to have this little ball be above the buttons. There's a constraint here, and that's really only a definition because the constraint actually happens in these two scripts here. Only thing that does is it allows me to define which area I want to actually matter, and only in this area will the fingers be visible. So as soon as they move out, I'll just scale them down. And yeah, so that's just measuring if they are within reach, and if they aren't, how far they are outside of it. Let me check if I can quickly show you that, because it was simpler than I expected, really. So trigger enter, just checking if it's a hand, checking if we're maybe no, we're checking if we're already tracking the object, in which case we do nothing. Here we're checking if we're actually dealing with the tag. If we are, we get the hand information. We check if it's the left or the right hand, because this one tracks the left hand, this one tracks the right hand. That was the most simple solution. Just double up the script instead of trying to track two objects and deciding on the fly what to do when one of them left and stuff. Just run it twice. It's almost the same. If it is the correct hand entering, we set the target's transform to something in tweezer control. So that's the little yellow thing I showed you. And just pick the location of that sphere relative to the hand controller. And then turn stuff on, turn the object on. And once it's on, and here we check if we're interacting with something, because if we're holding something while we're entering the zone here, so my hand is holding something, I don't want the finger to appear because I'm busy with probably the cassette or something, trying to insert that. I don't need that white sphere there depressing buttons while I deal with other stuff. But if we're not holding anything, we scale the sphere depending on if it's inside the cube, the box we defined here. Just a very cheap checking if we're if the clamp position is inside, and then if the clamp position, if the original position is outside, we know exactly how far away from the box we are, and we use that to scale the sphere, so it scales up as you come close to the thing here. Let me just demonstrate that quickly. It is, though, still a bit, sorry, I should turn my voice down a bit. It's still a bit buggy. It doesn't always work as I expected, but as you can see, as long as I within the box, it is big enough to press the buttons, and it scales down if you move to the side. Just a bit of fanciness, and the fact that it suddenly disappears here is probably, I have to look into it. Let me check. Probably because my hands here, the controller is built up of many small colliders. So there's one here, there's one there, there's one there, and probably when I do this, there's one of those colliders is leaving the bigger box, so it just turns off. So I just still have to fix that. If I hold my hand like this, oh, it's still buggy. Well, there's a bit of bugginess there, which I'm going to fix. And the second script just does the exact same thing for the other controller. So I kind of like this effect. So the controls of the objects define how they will react to the hand, instead of the hand having to change when it comes close to the controls. I like how that works. Okay. I hope that was a bit clear. I can show you some ugly code that tries to fix the bug already. I'm maintaining a hash set of hand bits, so every collider that enters and then leaves gets tracked instead of just the hand itself. Let me see, hand bits here. So as soon as we recognize the hand, I think I already know what's going wrong. If a collider enters that, if a second collider of the same hand enters, we need to track it and fill it into the hand bits hash set here. But because we're already tracking a hand, we're not running this code over here. I'm not gonna try and fix that on camera, but that's a nice spot. The idea is that only when all the hand bits over here, if all the colliders that have been tracked have left the cube, then we turn off the tracking and don't display the sphere anymore. So that should fix it. All right, these are my tweezer buttons, and they depress the eject, stop, play, and record buttons, and I have explained how they work on the rest of the machine, so let me show you the rest of the machine. So, the lid. Now this is a funny one. I already showed it in a little Twitter tutorial thingy. I messed with this one a lot and then finally decided, oh, what would be the easiest solution, because I want this thing to physically go open, be like a spring joint which you can bash and which moves around, but then when it's closed I want it to be firmly stuck into place and not do anything at all. And physical objects tend not to work like that, especially not when jointed to other objects. So let me run through this. This is just a rigid body with a box collider and a hinge joint joining it to the cassette deck. And the hinge joint here is, well, just a limited hinge joint that over there with a spring value that moves it into the upright position at degrees of -44. The motor here doesn't get used, and there are some test values in there. These are just the limits, so it's, well, it's a joint, it has limits. And the connected mass scale is somewhat lower, so it hops up the cassette deck a bit, but not too much. I made a closable hinge script that handles all the state changes and stuff. But the most important thing is that as soon as this detects that the lid is closed, it completely shuts itself off. So this game object gets disabled with everything inside. And the closed lid proxy here, this is just a copy of that same model with not even a box collider, because I turned that one off, and just a sound on it that gets activated, and I have nothing to worry about. The thing is, if I can explain it quickly, normally you'd think, if you're into physics a bit, that what you need to do is as soon as the lid closes, that you need to turn this rigid body into a kinematic body, so you have full control over it. The problem is, with kinematic body on one side of a joint, is that the other side of the joint thinks there's a kinematic body that it should connect to, which is still in space, even if it's the child of itself. So in fact, this should kinematically move with the cassette deck, but because the cassette deck thinks, oh, I'm jointed to a kinematic body, it stays, I think it secretly assumes that the joint here should fix it in place. So there's all kinds of nastiness occurring when you just try to make it kinematic. Another option would be make it kinematic and destroy the hinge joint and make the hinge joint reappear as soon as you want it opened, and then you have to, via script, set all these settings again, which I tried, but it also doesn't work. Of course, you're then left with a rigid body kinematic inside another rigid body, which can lead to other problems. And the other thing I tried, obviously, is when the hinge is closed, just change the limits to 0 and 0, and it should stick in place. But, well, it's physics. Things don't stick in space. They tend to move tiny bits, and tiny bits times tiny bits get bigger bits. So the lid kept moving about if I moved the cassette deck, and it was ugly. So, eureka moment, just turn the thing off. The whole thing, including the joint and the rigid body and the box collider, and even the script I wrote. Turn it off, and everything works somehow. And because I have an eject button to open it back up, I can just, in the eject button, say to that script, even though it's disabled, a function call still gets into that script. I just call on the disabled script, on the closable hinge script, double click, and I think it calls release, right? Let me check. Yes, it calls on release here. And release just makes the object turn itself back on, which is perfectly doable in an event called script, so to say. And turns all the things back on, turns the proxy LED here off, and makes the whole machine wear into motion, and the spring is still set up so that the lid will open up to that angle that we saw, and it all just works. It's amazing. So let me check how far in we're now. 40 minutes. Well, we're getting somewhere. Let me just show you the hinge thing. If there's something interesting now, we talked about the release function. Snap close is the reverse of that. This gets called whenever. Let me check. If in fixed update we check if we're open, and we check. Yeah, I have a little timing thing here. Let me check open duration. Oh no, I'm sorry. I'm making a mess of this. Am I now? Let me see. Yeah, this is just for when it opens. You want to have a bit of time. You want to allow for a bit of time for it to open before you're going to check if it's closed. Because at the moment that you begin opening it, it is in fact closed. So this just prevents from it closing immediately. Here's the angle being measured. And we use a hinge joint, so we can just pick up the angle from the joint itself. If it's smaller than, I think a tiny, close angle is like 5 degrees, so that's like so, and then we call it closed, and we snap close. And that's the reverse of the release, so to say. Just some setup, some values to remember. I think I can remove all this, because that's just setting up the hinge. But it works, it's in here. I won't remove it as long as it works. So, that's the lid. Now, I think I want to do the slotting. And I could do that with the cassette slots, because there's a slot inside here. But in which you can push the cassettes, but I think it's more obvious to do that with the batteries. So let me do that with the batteries. Okay, I'm just gonna have a slight pause, just so I'm sure my video works and stuff. And see you in a bit. So, battery slotting. Okay, let me just turn this thing over, and before I do that, I will turn this off so it doesn't get in the way, because it's such a huge machine now. And this way we can at least have a good look at the two battery slots. It's not that difficult really what happens here. So this is one of the slots. Let me see, it's a box collider, a tiny one at the bottom. Why can't I see the box collider? Oh, I should open it up, sorry. Yeah, let me disable this one. There's a box collider at the bottom of the slots, and that just registers if a, see, well, we talked about that before. This just registers on trigger entry. I think trigger entry, right? Yeah, here on trigger entry. If the other object is slottable in this object, so it should have the tag, else we return. It should have a slottable component, else we return. Wait a moment. I'm realizing now that I'm not even checking the type string here. Huh. Which means... no, I'm not using the type string anywhere, so I still need to do that. Give me a moment, I'm gonna fill that in on my list, which you are not allowed to see. Muhahaha. Let's check. Sorry, so I don't check the thing. Oh, you haven't seen that. Okay, I will close this quickly. And now I'm back. So the thing I just explained a bit ago, that the batteries have this string here, slottable type battery. Battery slot has the same string here, but it doesn't get checked. So that means, let me see if I can do this. Let me have a try. I didn't even debug this properly. Let me have some fun. That would mean that we can put cassettes inside, batteries inside the cassette slots. If yes, there we go. Excellent. And that means we can put cassettes inside battery slots if we get the orientation right. Yes, we can. It's ridiculous. Woohoo! Another nice YouTube catch. Cool. So that check I should still build in. Let me check. I think, okay, this one I can do live. If we're not slottable, then we return. If slottable dot type, I guess. Slottable type is not equal to slottable type here, then we return. You see magic happen right in front of your eyes. Okay, this will take a while to compile. I'm pressing play and putting my stuff on. And now the cassette won't go in anymore. Cool, 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 cool. And the battery can't enter these slots anymore. Nope. I have to turn it around because I'm checking for the orientation of the cassette, so you can't enter it like this. You can't enter it like this. And you can't enter it like this. You have to enter it like this. There we go. Okay. Back in the real world. Let me check that everything still works. Yes. Cool. Nice fix. So, okay. We were running through the script. On trigger enter, we check those things, and if we are already here we call on a function run test, and that tests, it's over here, the alignment of the thing. I'll get to that in a bit. And if the alignment is good as soon as the thing enters, we just accept it. Else we remember that we're busy entering an object, because this only triggers on trigger enter. As soon as we've entered the trigger, we should every so often check if the object is aligned correctly. So we just add it to I think a hash set here, yes. And during, I guess, fixed update? No, I guess update, okay. Okay, we check it on updates, which is a bit weird. We could just as well do fixed update here. Once every so often, it gets set in these lines. I think check frequency here. Check frequency is just as 2, so 2 times a second. We check if one of these slottables, we only can accept one at this moment, comes through the test, and then if it does, we accept it over here. And the test just does the alignment. So I have test types. I have none, so you can enter the object any which way you like. I have align Z, which means that just the Z axis needs to be aligned. That was obviously the right one for the batteries here, because you should be able to rotate every like this, but the Z axis should be aligned. And then I have line Z plane Y, and that's made for the cassette deck. So, well, I showed you. You will want to have the forward direction good, and the Y direction up or down should also be good. So it's that means that it can go in like this, and not like this. But if it is like this, it can go in again, even though it's upside down. That's the what I mean with the plane align Z plane Y expression here. And that's just done here. So test type none, we return true. Align Z, we measure the angle between the Z axis here, and if it's less than 30 angles, we allow it 30 degrees. Align Z plane Y, we measure the angle between the two forward directions. If that's less than 30 degrees, and the absolute value of the angle between the two Y vectors decreased by 90, because we want to pick up on a 0 and we want to pick up on 180. So we decrease by 90 and check if it's bigger than 60, and then we allow it, we return true. So, and then there is trigger exit, where we leave, or we stop following the object to be inserted. And we have a few deslotting functions that all run down. Oh, well, this is a delayed function made especially for the cassette deck, that it doesn't deslot immediately on calling the function. No, I don't know. Oh yeah, sometimes we want to pass a hand. Let me think, why was that again? Yeah, I made this. I'm not using the hand at all at this moment, but I had an instance in the game where you could take out the batteries again. I can show you why that is a bit hopeless, so to say. Let me think. Can I? Can I really? Yes, I think I can. I'll just show it with this battery here. No, I'll show it with both batteries so you can see why it's not the best idea here. These are the eject battery lock location here. I just put a mesh in there just so I can see where the battery would turn up if you remove it from the slots. Same with the Tapedeck, and that's just a trigger here. And if I turn the shit on, like the interactable item script, the object slot ejection tab script, and the hover highlight is nice as well, I think. Yes. And then you can see this is just another handle that your hand can move into, and when your hand moves into it, the object here will light up, because that's the static battery here, the proxy battery. And it allows you, because it's an interactable item, and it allows you to grab it. Once you grab it, a signal can set to the slots to eject the battery and put it in your hand. Oh, I hope this still works. This could also be a bit crashy. So we put you in. I'm deliberately staying away with my hands to enter them cleanly so I don't mess up my scripting. So now I can move my hand to them. Yes, see, and they highlight a second close, denoting that I should be able to pick them up and pull them out. But as you can see, it's so easy to accidentally touch them both. Even worse, it's way too easy to try and pick up the object and instead picking up a battery. So I decided to skip it. It has no gameplay value, because once these batteries are inside, you should not lose them like I am doing here. Let me show you an extra feature that some of you might not know. If something is far away, you can grab the air and make circling motions, and you get a little telekinetic control, and you take up the object and you put it back in. There we go. So that was the Jakey Bad Audi bit, which is nice, but we don't use it. Anyway, I will turn that back off. So that's turning these ones off. The collider should turn on, because that's a... do we need that? I don't think we need this collider. Let me think. No, we don't need those to do anything. We do use the objects itself, because this is, that's why I showed you with the mesh. This is, might we ever eject it? And that's in the case of the batteries, not very interesting. But in the case of the cassette slots, it is, of course, a bit interesting. Let me show you this just the wrong way around. I'm saying that, but I'm not sure. Let me check. Eject lock. Yeah, this is where I eject the cassette, relative obviously to the lid. So the tape just gets placed there if I hit eject. Okay. Anyway, we were talking about how we don't need these things. This all because I came across the word hand here. That's where we use the variable hand for, the parameter. So we know which hand should receive the ejected battery, but we don't use that. These slots simply, let me see, it deactivates stuff. So as you see in the object slot here, it has an activate on accept group, and that can activate stuff that should be deactivated as soon as the game starts, so to say. And I just use that to activate a mesh here with the battery shading and a collider, so you don't the other battery doesn't get pushed into it and stuff. So this is just like with the proxy trick with the lid. I just replace it with a proxy of the battery. Then there's other stuff happening if you enter it correctly, and that is which you define here. On accept, I turn two game objects on, and that's if you're sorry. I'm making a mess of it. I'm sorry. There's three events that can happen. The slot can accept stuff. The slot can throw an error. So this is the wrong object to enter in here. Or I think this only triggers if you're aligned wrongly. I'm quite sure, actually. And on eject is an extra event which I don't use. So if we accept the object, we activate this one. If we reject the object as its alignment, at least, we activate this one. And those are just a few particle systems with sound attached. So right is these two particle systems. These trigger when you enter them correctly. These two trigger when you enter them wrongly, so that's more like a dangery spark thing. I also had an icon that would trigger be visible, but I decided to turn that off, and there's just a few sounds. Oh, this is wrong, this is correct, and then we pitched that nicely here. So thing is inserted, this thing gets the proxy battery here gets activated. One of the right or wrong game objects, this one or this one, gets activated, and the battery itself, so the one you're putting into it, it depends. I'm having a few types here. None means nothing will happen to it. Destroy is what I should be using right now. Just destroys it. Slot tries to actually put it in the slot instead of using a proxy. Keep hidden, it just deactivates it, but keeps it as part of the slots. So you can retrieve it later. This is for the CassetteDeck, obviously. Yeah, that's the slotting, I think. Anything else interesting? Awake on start, no. Trigger enter is just a bunch of checks. And we ran through this already, and we're checking here if we should keep checking the objects, updates. Well, this is what I just explained, but in script form. And this is the test, and this is just some helper functions. So I think that's about it. I could also, let me try see if my undo buffer will survive everything I've done. Nope. Oh, wait a moment. This is adventures. Yes, there we go. And just a quick run to see if everything works still. Didn't mess stuff up. Alright, we still have to do the these two buttons. Let's... oh. Yes, very nice. Okay. Oopsie. Okay, that still works. Now, these are actually pretty simple. The peripherals. They're just two game objects that get deactivated on start. And I even have a function here, disable on start, but that's not what I'm actually running. Let me check. No, because that's the start function, and then I disable the start function here. They get deactivated because these two buttons get depressed, so it all happens automatically. So I can remove the where are they? Oh, here. I can remove this one. I define here just a definition trick that this isn't an object that you can put into your inventory. Setup is pretty basic, just a row, well, in the headphone, a very big bunch of colliders to get the shape more or less correct. I think the spheres are turned off, yeah. And I just group them into a CC collider things here. It's a rigid body. It has a bit more, yeah, I balanced the drag and the angular drag force. Both of these in combination with the line. It's an interactable item for Newton VR, and it has, very importantly, spring joints. And the spring joints, I have set that up here in the simple cable script for now, as a start and end targets that gets fed into the spring joint anchor locations. So the start joint point is over here, and the end joint point is over here. And the simple cable simply also picks up on the line renderer and feeds those 2 points into the line renderer continually. So that here is a cable drawn. The spring joint is really basic, just balanced out which are nice spring and damper settings for this to work. This whole object simply gets activated as soon as you press the play button, and there's not really many things happening here. Same goes for the microphone. There's one thing happening, but let me just first show the microphone. That's the exact same setup. Rigid body, interactable item, spring joint. This one has 2 capsule colliders. It also has a line renderer and a simple cable script from itself to the microphone plug, just for the spring and the cable. Now, both of these have a very simple script here that says infect activation, and all that does is tell the mini jack plug to activate as soon as we are activated, and same for the microphone plug. It tells the microphone tells the microphone plug to activate as soon as it discovers it itself is being activated, and same with deactivation. So these are treated as one activate deactivate object, so to say. There's one interesting thing happening here with the reappear transform, and it's very, very simple. It just at start remembers where it is in space, in local space relative to its parent. So it will always, as soon as you reactivate it, so it has been deactivated for a while, you reactivate it, it will appear over here. And then there's an extra option inside there, keep parent upright, that also does this for the parent transform, so this one. So every time they reappear, even if the cassette deck has some weird configuration because I'm holding it, the parents will have remembered which way it was oriented when it started, and will turn itself like this at the moment of reappearance, and the things will always fall from the top down, so you always notice them, and they won't appear like below the table or something. That won't be very good. That's all, right? What am I forgetting? Peripherals, headphones. Here's the song DJ Tylo, Mr. Perfect. And the microphone has nothing really interesting attached. So, well, I guess that's it. I hope this wasn't too messy, because it felt messy. But there was a lot to go through, but I thought, let's just do it. Let's do it now before I add functionality to it that I want to keep a secret for now. Both because I don't know what exactly I want to do with it yet, and both because, well, if it comes close to what I have in mind, it could be a very nice, and better to reveal it later than just do a half-assed explanation now. I hope this was useful and understandable and stuff, and it was for me also a joy to just walk through it and see my own mess here and there. But I really like how I have a workflow now with what I told you about, that objects tends to figure stuff out for themselves. So the headphone knows what it should do as soon as it's activated. It knows it should do something to this object and then keep itself upright. And it has nothing to do with the big manager thing. Same with the buttons. The buttons know what they should do, and the big manager thing just subscribes to those buttons when only if it needs to pick up on some of the signals, and by and large not all of them. The fingers figure everything out for themselves. The slots figure everything out for themselves. These two slots don't even have to communicate together. These two things don't have to communicate together. It all gets figured out with little activations and deactivations, and, well, yeah, that's maybe the downside. Events on everything. But it works. Okay, I hope it was useful. Enjoy, and see you later. Bye bye.